Bloodletting at the Tana Delta is not ending. Now, 11 people were killed today in Kibusu village in the Delta in what appears to be a resurgence of ethnic clashes in that area. According to the Kenya Red Cross, the dawn attack claimed 5 children, 3 men and 3 women. The Kibusu killings are believed to be revenge attacks following the death of 6 in Duru village yesterday. Our senior Coast Region reporter Ferdinand Omondi brings you the full story.
Another day, another killing spree.
Mama! Mama changu, mama!
And on this day, it was the turn of a hitherto peaceful Kibusu village to fall prey to a savage attack by ethnic cleansers, leaving 11 dead and many more injured.
Among them, 5 children. And some of the bodies were burned in the houses, and they're actually burned beyond recognition.
Kibusu hajapigana na mtu yoyote kutoka ulimwengu umbwe dunia umbwe. Kibusu hajapigana na mtu yoyote Kibusu. Halafu hakuja na kuwa watu wetu hapa.
The attack appears to have been retaliatory. Only on Wednesday, 10 people were hacked to death in Duru village, and the attack on Kibusu is believed to have been carried out by a community avenging the death of their own.
Na wamekuja na silaha kali, bunduki kali zikipiga watu kama wanapiga ndovu.
The wanton killings in the Tana Delta have resumed in spite of a heavy presence of security forces. In fact, Nduru village, where the attacks took place, is only 200 meters away from a GSU camp, and it is unclear how they were unable to stop it.
We decided to dispatch a contingent of 2 platoons that I came with, who are still pursuing the raiders.
Tunataka kujua kuwa watawapata ama hawatawapata, manake muji tumewaambia wako muji fulani na bunduki ziko muji wao wa Galili.
And the area member of parliament is now calling for drastic measures.
Time has now come for the use of unconstitutional means to deal with this issue. I would appeal for the minister coming from the member of parliament of this area that this is the time to issue a shoot to kill order. We need that firmness, that resolve to deal with the gangsters.
Nearly 200 people have died since the ethnic clashes pitting 2 communities began mid-last year. Those left behind are now fleeing in droves as they believe another attack is inevitable. Ferdinand Omondi, KTN.
Now, the ongoing attacks in the Tana Delta is raising doubts about the government's commitment and will to end the chaos. Over 160 people have died since last year when the violence erupted. Now, the deaths have not spared security agents, raising fears that armed groups could be behind the clashes. And as KTN's Linda Ogutu reports, many questions remain unanswered, and the buck has to stop with someone.
20 and rising. That is the total number of people killed in Tana Delta in 2 days in attacks and counter-attacks that have pitted 2 communities against each other. The 2 will just not agree on how to share the grazing and farming resources along the river Tana.
I
don't know what's happening with these 2 communities, because they seem not to be interested in development.
The 20 are part of over 140 people who have so far been killed in senseless killings in the Tana Delta, including 9 police officers. The resurgence of the killings making it clear that this number could go higher.
For as long as these people in Tana think and believe that the government has no capacity or it doesn't have the will to deal with this problem decisively, then I think we are yet to see worse things. The moment the population targets law enforcement officers, any government should start asking itself, what is it that we are thinking about, and now something is happening.
At the height of the killings, members of parliament toyed with the idea of deploying the military to quell the attacks. President Mwai Kibaki instituted a dusk to dawn curfew, if only to stop the killings and restore sanity between the two communities. It has not worked. Yesterday's attack happened at 5:30 in the morning and today's attack just before 7, the curfew notwithstanding.
When we start using our military to deal with internal security problems, that is the epitome of failure.
The government stamp of authority over 2,000 strong force, mostly from the General Service Unit, deployed in the area has since been withdrawn. Priority has now been given to the upcoming general election, with bulk of the officers redeployed to different parts of the country. The government and indeed the security forces may have shot itself on the foot with both the deployment and the recall.
What is the mission of these police who were deployed in Tana River?
You see, Tana River is a very small plot. It's a very small area. So even the 2,000, I didn't understand what they were doing on the ground.
I, David Kimayo.
Newly appointed Inspector General of Police David Kimayo's attempt to set up a team to investigate those funding and inciting the warring communities is yet to yield any fruit. And there seems to be no idea on how to end the attacks.
We cannot put police in each and every door of an individual. I'm sure from the village where you come, there was no policeman in your mother's door last night.
Area leaders have kept mum since yesterday when the attacks resurfaced. Focus, it seems, is bent on the upcoming elections and campaigns to ensure they remain relevant politicians past the March vote. Well, analysts say the picture on the ground is that of a civil strife that has taken its own life, one that may need a change in the rules of engagement if the killings between the two communities has to come to an end.
Start with dealing with it as a people who are not willing and ready to live peacefully within a democratic society. The moment you classify the Tana River problem as a people rebelling against a democratically elected government, people who are not willing to live within law and order, then even under the Geneva Conventions, you are given the legal framework to deal with that problem from that time.
For now, without an end in sight, the country holds its breath, hoping that each attack will be the last they will hear of from the Tana Delta region. Linda Ogutu, KTN Prime.
Now it's only the 10th day of 2013 and we have already lost 19 Kenyans to a senseless conflict in Tana Delta that now seems to have no end in sight. Now only yesterday 6 people were killed in clashes between two communities, and this morning a further 11 people were butchered in retaliatory attacks. Now this latest violence on Kibusu village begs the question, where is the government security apparatus? Fresh in our minds is the loss of more than 140 lives in the same area in August last year. What will it take the government to stamp its authority in Tana Delta to bring an end to these gruesome murders? The Inspector General of Police, David Kimayo, visited the clash-torn region late last year and promised to initiate a disarmament program that he said would mop up all illicit arms in the hands of the combatants. Now, with today's flare-up, however, it appears not much progress has been made in this front. It is now loudly whispered, even in official circles, that well-connected individuals may be behind the mayhem in the Tana Delta. But just how many more people need to die before the authorities can wake up to the reality that all is not well in this county? Is the pain of mothers crying for their babies not enough to force the government's hand? What about the thousands now living in makeshift camps? This cannot be allowed to go on, otherwise all the lofty promises being made on the campaign trail and all the wonderful plans by our government will count for nothing. And that's our notebook for this week. Moving on to ICC matters, the upcoming trials at the International Criminal Court have moved a notch higher The prosecutor's office has now released a list of witnesses who will testify against Kenyan 4 suspects that include presidential hopeful Uhuru Kenyatta and his running mate William Ruto. 43 witnesses will testify against William Ruto and radio journalist Joshua Sang, while 31 witnesses will testify against Uhuru Kenyatta and former head of the civil service Francis Mudhaura. But as KTN's Dennis Onsarigo reports, the prosecutor is expressing frustrations that the government has not fully cooperated with the court.
Brace yourself for a long trial. That is the message coming from the ICC as the Chief Prosecutor Fatou Bensouda is projecting more than 2 years on the prosecution stand for each of the 2 Kenyan cases at the International Criminal Court.
Matter of the hearing.
The ICC prosecutors formally submitted before the ICC judges a list of witnesses she seeks to call during the trials of 2 presidential candidates, a Deputy Prime Minister Uhuru Kenyatta, his running mate Eldoret North Member of Parliament William Ruto, former head of public service Francis Mudhaura, and former radio presenter Joshua Sang. While submitting a list of witnesses' material evidence, which include both audio and video, the ICC Chief Prosecutor told the trial judges her office might be forced to amend her list of witnesses and evidence in the event individuals she seeks to interview are allowed to grant her team of investigators a date. But the Chief Prosecutor was in the past expressed concerns over the manner in which the Kenyan government has handled its expressed cooperation with the Hague-based criminal court. Now says, even though the Kenyan government has in the past agreed on paper that it's willing to fully cooperate with the international court, our office is now seeking help from other quarters. In our statement, the ICC prosecutor says in part, the prosecution has already approached several state parties, including the government of Kenya, in order to gain access to such individuals and materials. Discussions regarding the terms and conditions of such access are still ongoing. The prosecution wants the Kenyan government to allow it to interview government officials and journalists who covered the post-election violence and gain access to documents including medical, financial and official records repeatedly requested from the Kenyan government, but as of this date not provided.
The chamber wants to hear the...
In the case of William Ruto and radio presenter Joshua Sang, 41 witnesses and 3 experts have been lined up, and the court estimates it will take 826 hours of court time. The court will be sitting for at least 4 hours a day. That means the prosecution will take at least 206 days. The defense could need similar days or more to cross-examine the witnesses.
I need to have the full knowledge of those allegations.
Deputy Prime Minister Uhuru Kenyatta and the former head of public service, Francis Mudhaura, have lined up 31 witnesses. The prosecutor says she will need at least 572 hours to put up its case. This means the prosecution will need at least 143 days. The defense will need similar time or more. The 2 presidential candidates, William Ruto and Uhuru Kenyatta, have assured their supporters the running of government will not be affected in the event they are elected into office. Denson Sarigo, KTN, Nairobi.
Now, members of parliament are back to their old mischief. Last night, they awarded themselves a hefty 9.3 million shillings gratuity each once Parliament winds up. Finance Minister Njeru Githai sneaked in an amendment in a bill awarding state officers a retirement package to override President Mwai Kibaki's rejection of their pay packs. Now, in the same breath, Parliament approved a 25 million shilling retirement package for send-home package for the President in a move that has infuriated the Salaries and Remuneration Commission and the civil society. KTN Samugina reports.
Acknowledge the President at liberty to do so.
Members of Parliament connived Wednesday night and reinstated the 9.3 million shillings gratuity payment that had been rejected by President Mwai Kibaki last month. And with it, the 10th Parliament will force taxpayers to cough up nearly 2 billion shillings to cushion the 224 lawmakers. In so doing, MPs rubber-stamped President Mwai Kibaki's 13.7 million shillings send-off package in a night session that saw them approve the Presidential Retirement Benefits Amendment Bill 2012 and the Retirement Benefits Deputy President and Designated State Officers Bill 2012.
To support this bill.
In a self-preservation move, MPs approved it after the Finance Minister Njeru Githai sneaked in an amendment to the Retirement Benefits, Deputy President and Designated State Officers Bill 2012, reinstating the MPs' pact that was unanimously passed.
We don't have a quorum.
To conceal their motives, the amendment was not listed on the business agenda of Parliament, only to be brandished during the night debate. But the Salaries and Remuneration Commission has rejected Parliament's move to fix state officers' pay, saying they will petition the President to reject the bills as they are not constitutionally drafted.
2 bills already approved by Parliament cover state officers and therefore ought to have been discussed by the Commission for the purposes of ensuring affordability, sustainability, and even transparency in the handling of the same.
Also in the package are family diplomatic passports, unlimited access to VIP lounges in all airports across the country, and armed bodyguards even in their retirement, a reserve of retired heads of state.
By denying Kenyans the opportunity to participate in the debate about the 2 bills, Parliament has blatantly gone against the Kenyan Constitution Article 118(1)(b), which requires Parliament to facilitate public participation.
They have also proposed state funerals for top state officers like the President, Deputy President, House Speaker and Deputy House Speaker, Chief Justice and his Deputy, Director of Public Prosecutions, Inspector General of Police, National Intelligence Service Boss and Secretaries to the Cabinet. Kenya has only had 2 state funerals, that of founding President Jomo Kenyatta and former Vice President Kijana Wamalwa. President Kibaki holds the key to rewarding the MPs their acrimonious paybacks and equally himself over 25 million shillings for his tenure as the bill awaits his assent. Samogina, KTN.
And that story brings us to a big question tonight, and it reads, do you think the MPs deserve the 9.3 million shillings send-off pack? Now, send your brief comments beginning with a yes or a no right away to our SMS number. It's 8040. We'll be sampling, as we always do, your comments at the end of this live newscast. And we are very, very pleased to welcome our next guest. She is Sarah Serem, the chairperson of the Salaries and Remuneration Commission. She's here to expound on the story you just heard on this very obscene increase of benefits for the legislators. Now, what do you think of this whole scenario, Sarah?
It's indeed saddening for the Kenyans to get a message of this kind at the very beginning of the year, when we are supposed to be celebrating and looking forward to a fruitful year. We are seeing our legislatures turning back what we have reaped and looking forward into what I would call today a ridiculous pay.
Now, they amended the law very quietly and at night to amend themselves this hefty package. Did they consult your commission?
Njoroge, I would say it didn't really matter what time they do it, so long as they do the right thing.
Yes.
But I would tell you right away that we were never consulted. It's a matter that we
Why
had
not?
had.
Why not, Sarah? Why did they not consult you? You're a constitutional created commission. This is your job to determine these kind of things.
Yes, indeed.
Why didn't the legislators consult you?
I think the only people who can answer that are themselves, because the law is very clear.
Mm-hmm.
The mandate for salaries and remuneration is indeed very clear.
Mm-hmm.
And I would again state that we have the sole responsibility of setting and determining remuneration for all state officers, including the MPs, the President, and all those that were covered by the bill. So going by what they did, we term that unconstitutional.
if it is unconstitutional, what's your next move to counter what they've done? Because it's unconstitutional according to the Constitution, according to your commission.
Yes.
What are you doing as the chairperson of this commission?
We know that this is the first stage of passing of the bill. But we have one very responsible president. And we are going to write an appeal so that he does not assent to it. We did that before.
Yep.
If you remember, there was a financial bill that the MP said again sneaked in an exit package of the same amount.
Yes.
And the president did not assent to it. We still apply the same constitution.
Yes.
It's still wrong. It remains wrong. And we want to inform the president that passing that is illegal, and the constitution, which we know that he has respected for the period
If
he
he
has
passed
served.
it? If he passed it by
If
any
he
chance?
passed it, it is unconstitutional, and therefore
Yes.
the legal framework will take its course.
Yes.
Yes.
I read here that the MPs, want to be accorded a state funeral as one of their send-off parks. State funeral. Isn't it amazing?
I don't know whether it's called amazing, but it's
Unbelievable.
ridiculous. It's unbelievable.
What will you tell Kenyans about your office, and how far are you going with the actual job of determining the salaries of all the people that you're in charge of? What can you tell the viewers?
We're telling the Kenyans we are there because the Constitution placed us there for a very important purpose, to ensure that we protect the sovereignty of these people.
Yes.
We ensure that we promote constitutionalism.
Yeah.
And we are indeed going to do that. For us to have been given the sole responsibility of setting and determining, it meant to bring sanity in the whole management of salary remuneration, so that we do not have individuals who have an interest being the same ones to set their salaries and to enjoy the same one.
Yes.
So that was basically removed so that we have independence and we have transparency and accountability. So we stand by that, and we are still saying that is wrong.
Sarah Serem, is your first time to come to KTN.
Yes.
It's an honor. Thank you very much. Sarah Serem, Chairperson of the Salaries and Remuneration Commission. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joroge.
The Ministry of Education is concerned that party primary nominations scheduled for the 17th of January 2013 would interfere with learning in public schools. Education Minister Mutula Kilonzo is now seeking the postponement of the nominations or a day off for the students. And as KTN's Eric Njoka reports, the Kenya Human Rights Commission is urging President Kibaki and Prime Minister Raila Odinga to declare the nomination day a national holiday over fears of chaos.
The reality of logistical challenges around the much-anticipated 17th January party nominations is now dawning not only to the politicians, but also to the general public. The Ministry of Education is now seeking a postponement of the nominations from the 17th of January to the 20th to avoid interference of the school term calendar.
They consider extending the deadline to Sunday 20th so that political parties can do nominations on Saturday and Sunday.
Concerns have been raised over classes being in session during and after the primaries. Party nominations are often chaotic. Scenes like these have headlined most nominations in the past. Since they will be done in school compounds or in fields around the schools, they are likely to impact negatively on learning activities. The first term of the school has already had some loopholes. First with a late opening date, and now the ministry is urging President Kibaki and Prime Minister Raila Odinga to call for a day off for the students or a push to the nomination date.
Tunaweza kumuuliza rais na waziri mkuu wakakubali kwamba shule za msingi ambazo ndizo nyingi zinatumika kwa kazi kama hii sipatiwe off, sende nyumbani, alafu tutatafuta njia kama wizara tumeshajadiliana tukakubali kwamba siku hiyo moja haiwezi kudhuru kalenda yetu ya primary schools.
We are joining them as a commission in appealing to employers to make it possible for Kenyans who are engaged in employment to be able to attend the nomination by giving them a day off.
An urgent meeting has now been convened on Friday between the Minister of Education and the Registrar of Political Parties to discuss the logistical issues surrounding the party nominations and schools. For the general election, students will be sent home for 2 weeks. This means that up to 50 lessons will not be taught for the period they will be away. This may increase in case of a runoff. Eric Njoka, KTN.
Prime Minister Raila Odinga is asking voters in Central Province to support him in the March 4th election as a reciprocation of his struggle for change that he says began in the province. The ODM leader toured President Kibaki's Nyeri County, where he met local leaders and businessmen spearheading his presidential campaign. KTN's Carol Nderi with that story from Nyeri.
Touchdown in Nyeri County, the Nyeri Technical Institute was where Prime Minister Raila Odinga commenced his tour of Nyeri County this morning before proceeding to a meeting with Nyeri business people and later on with ODM delegates. This was a different approach to courting the central voters, one that culminated in a courtesy call to former Minister Waruru Kanja. Accompanied by Turkana South Legislator Joseph Nanok, Lugari MP Cyrus Jirongo and a host of CORD supporters in central Kenya, including CORD Summit Chair SK Macharia, Raila sought to assure the people of central Kenya that he harbors no ill feelings against them.
People said, oh, Raila has made a big mistake saying Kibaki Tosha, the Luos can never vote for a Kikuyu. They will never. This is Raila has committed political suicide. I went and I told the Luos exactly what I've told you. There was no war between Kikuyus and Luos.
He expressed optimism that the CORD coalition has penetrated all parts of the country, central Kenya included.
Leo nimekuja kutangaza ya kwamba CORD imeingia ndani ya mkoa ya Kati, Central Province.
His supporters in Central, including Mkenya Solidarity Party leader Maina Njenga, were here to support him and were hopeful of a win in the forthcoming March elections.
Hizi chuchu zinazidi kuwa ati lazima ati mondo wito. Hiyo lazima iko.
We know exactly what should be done. And I am going to make sure that Raila becomes the president.
While outlining his dream for Kenyans, the PM spoke of his developmental record that will be continued should he be elected president.
Wale wengine wanasema ati hii katiba imeletwa na Wakenya wote. Na wale si wanajulikana. Leo wanasema sisi tutatekeleza katiba. Utatekelezaje kitu ambayo wewe huna imani naye?
The deeply entrenched tribalism is the greatest hindrance to Kenyans achieving their collective goals, something the Prime Minister cautioned Kenyans against. In perhaps what would be seen as a vote-seeking venture, Prime Minister Raila Odinga has seen the need to meet with leaders who are opinion shapers not just here in Nyeri, but also in the wider central Kenya, while expressing optimism that CORD will form the next government. Carol Nderi for KTN in Nyeri County.
Now, the Jubilee coalition's leading lights, Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto, today campaigned in Baringo County, where they appealed to KANU Chairman Gideon Moi to dump the Musalia-led Amani coalition and join them in the race to State House. Uhuru and Ruto said the Jubilee alliance was better placed to form the next government. The two spoke as Vice President Kalonzo Musyoka called on the political leadership in South Sudan and the Sudan to continue engaging in dialogue and find a homegrown solution for lasting peace in the two Sudans.
The Jubilee Coalition presidential aspirant Uhuru Kenyatta and running mate William Ruto were on a vote-hunting mission in Baringo County. And to maximize on their reach, the two held separate rallies in different parts of the county before capping their campaign with a joint rally at Kabarnet Town.
Na mzee moja akipita hapa akitembea, wengine akienda kanisa, mumwambie ile vijana yako wamekusalimia sana, bado wanakupenda, lakini ile nyumba walitoka na hawezi warudi huko. Kwa hivyo wanasema hata wewe mzee kuja ushirikiane na hawa huko na hiyo kijana yako pia, na ndio wale wa vitendawili waweze waende wakapumzi.
This election is not going to be about opinion polls.
it is not going to be about magicians. It is going to be about issues.
The two expressed hope that Kenyan voters will give the alliance opportunity to form the next government after the March 4th general polls. URP party leader William Ruto said under the Jubilee government, the police service and Kenya Defence Force will team up to tackle insecurity in the volatile areas. And in Nairobi, Vice President Kalonzo Musyoka held talks with Sudan First Vice President Osman Taha at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. Taha had made a stopover on his way to Khartoum from an official visit to South Africa. Kalonzo urged the political leadership in South Sudan and Sudan to continue engaging in dialogue aimed at promoting lasting peace in the two Sudans.
He has briefed me on the very successful talks that took place in Addis Ababa between President al-Bashir and President Salva Kiir, particularly over the very important issues surrounding Abyei and the issue of the border.
And finally, internet search giant Google has launched an online one-stop shop called the Kenya Elections Hub, where Kenyan voters, journalists and campaigners will easily track news, trends and information related to the upcoming general election. Patrick Amimo, KTN Prime.
Resident judges for 6 stations across the country to replace judges appointed to the Court of Appeal. Mutunga has also reorganized operations in the judiciary in order to ensure continued access and delivery of justice. In the changes, Justice Msaga Mbogoli will head the Criminal Division, Justice Luka Kemaru will head the Family Division, while Justice Pauline Nyamwea will head the Land and Environment Division. Justice Matthews Nderi Nduma will be the principal judge at the Industrial Court. In the same restructuring, the Court of Appeal will be decentralized to areas where there is a large backlog of cases, specifically Nyeri, Kisumu and Mombasa. The Court of Appeal will meet to elect their president on February 18, 2012, as well as pick their representative to the Judicial Service Commission. Now, calm return to the Mathare slums. After a day of chaos, Mathare has experienced at least 4 attacks in as many weeks, putting it in the limelight as rival groups launch attacks and counterattacks. A section of residents have blamed the state of affairs on ethnic tensions, while others point accusing fingers at politicians. Just what ails Mathare? KTN's Wilkils Tanyabwa reports.
To the ordinary onlooker, Mathare seems no different from any of Nairobi's informal settlements. Its inhabitants busy trying to eke a living under the harsh glare of the Nairobi sun, but the charred remains of the last 4 arson attacks and the tension that hangs in the air tell the story of an area that is simmering, and it all began with this bridge. This bridge serves as a boundary of sorts, marking the divide between groups that have in recent weeks launched attacks and counterattacks against each other, while they level accusations against each other. The latest attack would take place less than 10 meters from here. The attacks that have occurred in recent weeks have centered around Mathare Section 3C and 4B, and the bridge that separates the two areas. Individuals who live in 4B have to pass through 3C to get home.
We are like the road, that is where 3C starts. So if you are crossing to the other side, 4B, you have to pass through 3C from the road.
Section 3C has a high population of people drawn from the Kikuyu community, while Section 4B is inhabited largely by members of the Luo community. The bridge in between is the domain of a group of youth reported to terrorize passers-by. On Tuesday night, the group of youth targeted a man who was headed to 4B and stabbed him. Later that night, a group from 4B executed a revenge attack.
Guys who stay in 3B came to 3C and torched some houses. And in the process, I think 1 person died.
The spate of crime now taking the form of what could pass as an ethnic dispute, yet residents claim it is not.
Hii usalama siyo ya ukabila. Hii usalama ni dhidi ya vijana wale wamekataa kazi.
Fears abound that as the country heads towards the elections, the perception that there may be ethnic tensions at play renders Mathare residents vulnerable to manipulation by politicians.
Politicians will come and go.
but the locals will remain. And once elections are over, it is the locals who will live there forever.
Locals clinging to the explanation that Mathari's problems can be attributed to the unresolved issue of crime, but warning that if left unchecked, the dispute may mutate to take on a life of its own. Wilkis Anyabwa, KTN Prime.
A very good evening to you. My name is Boni Tunya. Let's look at business. The Central Bank of Kenya has today tipped the scales in favor of cheaper credit by lowering its benchmark lending rate by 150 basis points. CBK's Monetary Policy Committee for the fourth consecutive time cut the CBR rate from 11% to 9.5%. As the bank strives to stimulate economic growth, this is the first time since 2011 that the CBR rate is in its single-digit range, and all eyes are now trained on banks to see how they will ease the cost of borrowing. Michael Karanja has more.
Access to affordable credit has been like a mirage for borrowers since 2011, when the MPC raised the policy rate to a high of 18%, in response to the steep rise in inflation and currency volatility. But with inflation starting at 3.2% by the end of 2012, the tight monetary policy stance employed to rein in on inflation had worked, leaving the regulator focused on boosting economic growth. In making the reduction, the committee concluded that there was a positive outlook on the economy, including stability in both the product and foreign exchange markets, reflected in stable inflation and the exchange rate. Since July 2012, the MPC has been on an easing cycle and has so far cut 850 basis points off the lending rate. The last time Kenyans had any semblance of cheap and affordable credit was way back in 2011. Since then, the CBR went from a low of 6% to an all-time high of 18%. With that, commercial banks also steadily increased their lending rates to an all-time high of about 24%. Now, what this did was choke economic growth. For borrowers, the news is encouraging, with further expectations that commercial banks will ease the repayment rates on loans. But as has become the norm, banks' transfer mechanism has been slow to CBR reductions. Standard Chartered Head of Research Razia Khan, however, notes that the impact might be minimal, with banks likely to again take time to ease the borrowing burden. She further suggests that although the outlook for Kenya's economy remains relatively upbeat, the need to provide further stimulus to the economy was clearly felt. Economic growth slowed in the first 2 quarters of 2012 to 3.4% and 3.3%, raising pressure on the CBK to ease monetary policy to encourage domestic consumption. For now, the reduction gives an indication of the government's desire to realize its 5% economic growth outlook for 2012. Michael Karanja, KTN Business Today.
Moving on, years after initial plans to privatize state-owned sugar milling plants, the process seems to have gotten a new life. Parliament in its last days approved a report of the Parliamentary Committee on Finance, Planning and Trade on the privatization of 5 public sector-owned sugar companies. Our reporter Philip Keitani looks at the privatization journey.
In October 2010, the Kenyan cabinet gave a green light to the privatization of government-controlled sugar factories in the country, subject to parliamentary approval. The companies earmarked for privatization at the time were Nzoia Sugar Millers, Miwani, Sony, Chemelil, and Muhoroni, which had a collective debt of 50 billion shillings owed to the government and the industry regulator, the Kenya Sugar Board. At the time, the cabinet underscored the need to protect the interest of farmers in the privatization process, with farmers being given an opportunity to actively participate in the buying of shares in the factories as individuals and cooperatives. The government had planned to sell 51% of all the 5 sugar millers to strategic investors who were expected to bring on board private sector expertise and managerial skills and invest their stake in modernizing the factories. 30% of the sugar companies was to be sold to farmers, while the remaining 19% will be floated to the public through an initial public offer once the companies are back to profitability. The privatization of the factories is expected to enhance competitiveness and efficiency of the country's sugar sector ahead of the expiry of the Common Market for the Eastern and Southern African COMESA safeguard measures in February this year. But with the political hurdles done away with, A section of cane farmers still feel aggrieved. The farmers from the Miwani sugar belt felt Parliament ought to have offered debt waivers to the factories before dissolving.
And we are telling them that between now, today, and next week, when Parliament is being closed, may be closed, we want them to come back home when the debts have been written off, and should they fail, that this government is going to end without the writing off of the debts of the sugar industry. We are asking all the sugarcane farmers and to make sure that all the 42 MPs have been voted out.
Philip Keitan, KTN Business Today.
And from sugar, let's go to tea. The Kenya Tea Development Authority says it is focusing on training tea farmers across the country as part of boosting production in 2013. Speaking at Chinga, Othaya and in Nyeri County, Peter Kanyago, chairman of KTDA, said the skills taught are expected to realize an average of about 1.5 kilogram per tea bush in the year. Our Central Kenya reporter Carol Nderi has more.
A day after the nationwide tea elections were held to elect over 100 directors to different factory companies, emerging issues arose at the annual general meeting held at Chinga factory in Othaya, Nyeri County. Peter Kanyago, the chairman of KTDA, sought to clarify the controversy that surrounded the elections.
I don't know what the complaint is about. And you realize, since we started voting by shares, there have been a lot of order in the tea industry.
There has been a 5% increase in tea production since last year, and KTDA is optimistic that this figure will increase as they continue to equip tea farmers with skills to boost their productivity.
The prices are holding. You know, even with a high crop, the prices are holding, which is good for the farmers.
Already some tea factories, after value addition, are now selling their tea to foreign markets such as the United Kingdom. Earlier on, there was talk of introducing the purple tea variety that is superior and of better quality. However, KTDA says it is still under study to the Kangaita and Kericho tea factories. The industry is also facing the issue around mechanical picking of tea, a real thorn in the industry's flesh.
We are not ruling out machines, but we are very cautious. So we are doing experiments on how best we can use the machine and at the same time get good quality.
In the agriculture sector, tea is the highest foreign exchange earner. Carol Nderi for KTN in Othaya, Nyeri County.